Hello, everyone. Make sure you guys have a pencil or a pen. Make sure you guys have your highlighter, and then also make sure you guys have what will be your note page that the substitute teacher was supposed to pass out to you guys. Today, with the start of the new chapter, we're going to be talking about what will be the Constitution. But specifically, guys, we're going to be talking about the structure of the Constitution. So, your two essential questions are what does Article 1 through 3 establish in the United States Constitution? And then describe how the Constitution is amended, so changed. So, these two essential questions, guys, are at the top of what would be your note paper. And let's get started. So, the Constitutional Convention, guys, we mentioned talking about this, with what will be the Articles of Confederation PowerPoint. The U.S. Constitution was created and written in 1787. It was signed by 39 of the 55 delegates of the Constitutional Convention. And it was, signed on September 17, 1787, which will be known as Constitution Day. And it took about 2 years for majority of what will be, or all what will be 13 states to ratify what will be the United States Constitution. And the U.S. Constitution created the form and system of government that we use in what will be present day. So let's talk about kind of the U.S. Constitution and what it does. The United States Constitution sets up the government. So it sets up the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, which we'll talk about in more length in the next couple of slides. It defines the powers and limits the limits of the government. So government can only do what the Constitution does say. Sorry for the typo. And then it basically lays out the rights of the people, so the individual rights, those natural rights, but also something known as the Bill of Rights and other amendments that were added to the Constitution after it was written. The structure itself is broken up into three parts. You have what will be the preamble, which is the introduction to the Constitution. You guys will learn a little bit more about the structure of the actual preamble and the goals of the preamble tomorrow with the lesson that I have. You have what would be the articles, which they're broken down into 7 different articles or 7 different sections within the Constitution. And then you have the amendments, which is 27 amendments to the Constitution, or basically 27 changes from the time that it was created and ratified in 1789. So the first, section is what would be the preamble, which is the statement or purpose of what would be the Constitution. The preamble of the Constitution defines the 6 goals the document is required to do for the citizens of the United States. And those 6 goals that are outlined right there, those are the 6 goals that you'll learn a little bit more in detail about tomorrow with the lesson that I have assigned for you guys. Let's talk about Articles 1 through 3, which basically sets up the branches of government. So remember, guys, Articles 1 through 3 set up what would be the branches of government. So Article 1 deals with what would be the legislative branch, which makes the laws. And the legislative branch consists of what would be the House of Representatives and what would be the United States Senate. You have Article 2, which is what would be the executive branch. The executive branch carries out and enforces the laws throughout the nation, and that is considered the President of the United States. And then you have Article 3, which is the judicial branch, which interprets the meanings of laws. And that could be what would be the United States Supreme Court or what would be the lower courts. So always remember, guys, the acronym that is known as Let's Eat Jello. The word let's, or the letter L, represents what would be the legislative branch. The word eats, the letter E, represents executive branch. And then the word jello, and the letter J represents what would be the judicial branch. So always remember that. So if you guys forget what article, which one is Article 1, which one is Article 2, which one is Article 3, just use the acronym Let's Eat Jello. Articles 4 through 5. Article 4 shares the relationship between the states and the national government. The national government and state government share power. We know that as a federal system, but another word for it is what would be federalism. We'll talk more about that with the next PowerPoint that is known as the principles of the Constitution. But remember, Article 4, guys, deals with the idea of what would be federalism, the relationship between the states and the national government. Article 5 talks about and describes when and how the Constitution can be changed. Once again, guys, the United States Constitution has been changed 27 times since 1789, so there has been 27 amendments to what would be the Constitution. So I can tell you right now that is not a lot. So you can assume that it is very hard to change what would be the United States Constitution. All right, review question: which two branches of the government makes the laws and the other executes them? So think about that, guys, and then make that a mental note. Once again, you can use these as your left side questions if you would like. I don't mind. Article 6, what will be known as the Supremacy Clause. So, once again, the system of government within the United States is what would be a federal system. However, there is situations when what would be a federal law and a state law disagree with each other. However, when it comes to that particular situation, though, the federal law overrides what would be the state law. The Constitution and federal law is the supreme law of the land. So you always have to remember, guys, federal law is always going to trump what would be state law. Federal law is more powerful than what would be state law. And the Supremacy Clause, Article 6 of the Constitution, states that and makes that true within our laws. And then now, Article 7 just describes the ratification, or what would be the approval, describes the ratification and approval of what would be the Constitution. All right, let's talk about amendments, guys. Once again, amendments are changes to the Constitution. That's literally what amendments means, changes. There is 27 total amendments to the Constitution, so 27 changes. The first 10 changes to the Constitution, guys, is known as what would be the Bill of Rights. This is what the Anti-Federalists fought for during the Constitutional Convention, and we kind of outlined that with the last PowerPoint that we did. Once again, 27 total amendments, guys, since 1787 or 1789. So the founding fathers made it hard to amend or change what would be the Constitution, and you'll see the process in the coming slides of how how amendments can be added to what would be the Constitution. So the word propose means to put forward for consideration. All right. Since 1789, 27 amendments have been added. Amendments are first proposed, then ratified. Okay, so you have to propose something, put something forward first. And amendments are proposed within what would be the legislative branch. So there's two ways to propose an amendment. You would have to propose it, put forward within Congress, so within the legislative branch, and that amendment has to be approved or agreed upon by a 2/3 vote within each House of Congress. So basically, 66% of the members in both what will be the House of Representatives and the Senate have to agree to it. So there is 435 members within the House of Representatives. So 66% of those members have to agree to the amendment. There's 100 members within the United States Senate. So 66 individuals have to agree to that amendment. So that's the first way to propose an amendment. Another way is a 2/3 of states call for a constitutional convention. So 33 states must call for a constitutional convention. This, this way is the most uncommon one. So the one that you really truly need to know is the first way, which is the 2/3 vote of each House of Congress. That is the most logical, and that is the way that all 27 amendments have gone through in order to be added to what would be the Constitution. So the ratification process, after a amendment is proposed and it is approved by what will be Congress, ratify means approved. So there's two ways to ratify an amendment. 3/4 of the 50 state legislators have to agree to it. So all 50 state legislators, all 50 states vote on what would be the amendment in 3/4. So 38 states need to agree to it. And this way specifically is the most common way compared to the second way, which is a 3/4 of the special constitutional convention agree. So 3/4 of the states, 38 states need to agree to what would be then amendment to that change to the Constitution. And that is done through voting in all 50 state legislators. All right, interpreting the Constitution, guys, the Supreme Court is the final authority or the final say in interpreting what will be the Constitution. It's their main job. And there's two ways to interpret what will be the Constitution. There is a strict interpretation where you word for word, that's what it says and that's what it means. And then there is a loose interpretation where you kind of read in between the lines. There can be multiple meanings. There can be gray area in between certain, meanings within the Constitution. So this has always been, a room for debate, especially when it comes to certain things within the Constitution. But there is two ways to interpret it: a strict interpretation and a loose interpretation. Review questions, guys. What is the supremacy clause, and what is the process of being of being a new amendment on the Constitution? All right, something known as the necessary and proper clause, and this is also known as the elastic clause. The United States Constitution, guys, is a living document, and it can be changed over time. Okay, it's not something that cannot be changed. It can be changed over time. It's a living document. Okay. So, sometimes Congress, has the power to, do whatever is necessary and proper. So, especially in times of what we need, crisis, Congress can stretch its powers to meet the needs of what would be the country. So, especially in times of what would be crisis or in times of what would be need, the Congress expands its power more than what is stated within what would be the Constitution. Because once again, under Article 1 of the Constitution, it lists all the responsibilities and all the powers that Congress and the legislative branch has. But Congress and the legislative branch can use this, clause, which is known as the necessary and proper clause or the elastic clause, to kind of stretch their powers when needed. And sometimes Congress does this, but they don't try to abuse it. It's only in times of need or in times of crisis. All right, guys. So that is it for today's notes. So make sure you guys highlight key information. Make sure you guys have 3 left side questions, and then make sure you guys answer the 2 essential questions within your guys' summary. Your paragraph needs to be at least 4 to 5 sentences, and make sure you guys use details from your notes to answer the questions. Thanks, guys.